Welcome to the Premier League show. It's a review show and the preview show all bunged into one due to the jam-packed games happening over this festive period starting this coming Thursday. We're going to look back at some of the matches and preview some of the matches in both togetherness today. Before we do that, I'm joined by, as always, my brilliant co-host Paul James and the guest of Focus on Football, Luke, as well, is with us today as well. Before we introduce those, let me just show you the results from the weekend matches that have just been played. As you can see on the screen right there, Nottingham Forest 0, Tottenham Hotspur 2. That was the last game in charge of Nottingham Forest for Steve Cooper. We'll hear the thoughts of a Forest fan, Luke, in a few moments' time when we discuss their game this coming weekend. Bournemouth against Luton was match abandoned on the weekend due to a serious injury to Tom Lockyer. Things seem to be improving with him at the moment. So for the cardiac arrest of Tom Lockyer playing for Luton Town at the weekend, speedy recovery to him from everyone here at the Commentary Hub, JB Sports, Commentary Hub 2, Focus on Football, and of course Storm FM. Also, he finished Chelsea 2, Sheffield United 0, Man City 2, Crystal Palace 2, Newcastle 3, Fulham 0, Burnley 0, Everton 2, Sunday's matches, should I say, where Arsenal 2, Brighton 0, Brentford 1, Aston Villa 2, West Ham United 3, Wolverhampton Wanderers 0, and Liverpool 0, Manchester United 0. Let's take a quick look at the table, as you can see on the screen, just there in front of us. Arsenal at the top of the table, Sheffield United at the bottom, Everton 10-point deduction on 16 points. With that 10 points added back on, they'd be up into 10th and above Chelsea in the table would Everton. On what a turnaround Sean Dyche is doing there despite the 10-point deduction. 4 wins out of 4 for the Toffees now. They're Liverpool in second. The top two play each other this coming weekend. That's going to be a good one to watch. Aston Villa against Man City in third and fourth, respectively. Man City do not play this weekend. They're in the Club World Cup. So good luck to them in the FIFA Club World Cup. For Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, big boost for them is that Kevin De Bruyne is back training after a long and lengthy period out on the sidelines. Right then, let's take a look at the matches that we've got coming up very, very shortly on the preview as well. These are the games that we've got coming up. Crystal Palace against Brighton is on Thursday, live on the TC Hub. Aston Villa against Sheffield United on Friday. On Saturday, we've got West Ham against Manchester United. 3 o'clock kickoff, see Fulham against Burnley, Luton against Newcastle, Forest against Bournemouth, Tottenham against Everton, Liverpool, Arsenal is our featured game on Saturday at 5:30 here on the TC Hub. And then on Sunday, Christmas Eve, very Merry Christmas to you all out there. A very special Christmas show as Wolves take on Chelsea. 1 o'clock kickoff for that. Let me just now fetch in, before we get into the show, and dissect a few of the matches from the weekend and preview some of the matches as well. We've got Paul James, my excellent co-host, with us this evening. How are you doing, Paul? Are you okay?
I'm good, thank you, Russ. How are you?
Yes, really good, thank you, Paul. Good to be back on talking Premier League and football with you, as always, my friend. And also, as I mentioned, Luke, the guest of Focus on Football, is with us as well. Luke, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Russ, not too bad.
Good to have you on with us as well. Luke will be discussing the Nottingham Forest Bournemouth game and also the departure of their manager, Steve Cooper, a little bit later on. But let's start in the big game at the weekend, Liverpool against Arsenal. This is going to be a really good game. I did this when I spoke to Richard Bond, and I asked him for his thoughts on Arsenal going into this game against Liverpool at the weekend, in their performance against Brighton. Arsenal coming into this after Brighton won with a win over Brighton the weekend. Liverpool coming into it on back of a draw against Manchester United. I spoke to Richard Bond and he asked Richard. I said, "Hi, Rich. Thoughts on the performance from Arsenal against Brighton on Sunday, and how did you see their performance from Sunday's game against Arsenal affecting their game against Liverpool?" This is what he had to say.
I think, Russ, buoyed by their performance yesterday, Arsenal will be really up for the contest against Liverpool on the weekend. Now, it's going to be a tremendous match. The top two teams in the league, they played really well against Brighton, but just really lacked that cutting edge at times, but managed to get through. And that's what happens with good champions. And in that second half of that game, particularly, they did manage to get the breakthrough, and they showed, albeit by set piece, an Arsenal-like goal, but they scored that, and they're at the top of the summit, and they're there for a reason. I can see them going to Liverpool. Obviously, haven't lost at all at home this season. It's going to be a big challenge, but we see the way United set up yesterday afternoon as well. They put a couple of banks behind. Will Arsenal try and change their approach, or will they go for it? It should be a really good, entertaining game. Both sides capable of scoring plenty of goals, so it should be a good contest.
Thank you very much there to Richard for his thoughts on the Arsenal performance against Brighton, which was a good win for Arsenal in the end, and also previewing the game against Liverpool as well at Anfield this coming Saturday, which is a feature game here on the TC Hub with Paul James providing you all the excellent expert insight commentary for you here on Commentary. And Paul, I'll come to you next on this one. And what is your thoughts ahead of this game? And obviously, the Arsenal correspondent, obviously probably caught up with the Arsenal game from the weekend. You saw the Liverpool game from the weekend as well. Just give us your thoughts on the game, Liverpool against Arsenal, and how you see this game going. And if you've got any thoughts from there, Arsenal's 2-0 win over Brighton and Liverpool's 0-0 draw with Manchester United. If you've got any thoughts on those, feel free to drop those in as well.
Well, you really can't separate the two teams in terms of form this season. Excuse me. Both teams are doing very, very well. They both have an average goals per game of into the twos, and they share the exact same average goals against per match, 0.88. That's a real stingy amount for strong defensively both teams. In terms of the last 5 meetings, Arsenal have only won 1 out of the 5. And, they've been outscored 13-5 in the process of Arsenal. So you would look at that and think that Liverpool are perhaps favourites. But Arsenal really have come into it this season on their own. They've come into their own. They've played some very good football. They've looked like champions for parts of the season as well. And I think, as Richard said, these sort of carving these victories out away at Luton and at home to Brighton, where they haven't perhaps been at their best, is a signal of potential champions as well. Don't ask me to predict this one, Russ. I really don't know. You just can't separate these two teams. It's probably going to be a draw, but you just never know. Both teams have got quality for sure.
Paul obviously says it's going to be a draw there. I think it could be a draw as well. One thing I will ask you, the score draw or both teams cancelling each other out, what do you reckon?
It better not be a no-score draw, Ross. Do you know, I watched that Liverpool and Manchester United game, and I got to hand it to you, my friend. I don't know how you made that game sound exciting. I don't want a repeat of that. But we'll see how it goes. It'll be, I suspect the first half an hour will be very tight. Nobody will want to make an error.
Absolutely, and I think it's going to be a good game as well. I think it'll be tight. I think there'll be goals in the poll for you, so you won't have to enjoy another 0-0 and try and make it as exciting as I did Liverpool-Manchester United game of the weekend. But for me, I think it'll be tight. There'll be a goal in it either way. But I can't split them. I'm not sure which way to go, but I think it'll be tight and it'll go either way. Next up, then we're going to touch on the game which takes place on Saturday at 3 o'clock at the City Ground. Managerless Nottingham Forest sacked Steve Cooper today after their 2-0 defeat to Tottenham. They take on a Bournemouth side who, at the weekend, had their game against Luton match abandoned for that injury to Tom Lockyer in the game involving Luton Town. Score was 1-1 at the time in the Luton game against Bournemouth. It was a very, very poor defensive display from Nottingham Forest against Spurs at the weekend on Friday evening, in my opinion, from what I saw of that game. But I think Bournemouth were very unlucky not to be at least 2 up before the game was abandoned. At least 2 down, should I say. Unlucky not to be 2 down before that happened. And we'll have to wait and see how this goes. We're going to bring in Paul in now. Who's going to speak to our guest from his channel Focus on Football. And over to you, Paul.
Thanks, thanks, Russ. So yes, Nottingham Forest v Bournemouth at the City Ground. The news broke out of the City Ground today that Steve Cooper has been relieved of his duties as Nottingham Forest head coach. At this time, no replacement has been announced, although the reporters, the sort of respected reporters and news outlets are suggesting that Nuno Espirito Santo may be the replacement at the City Ground. I've got my guest on Focus on Football, Luke Turton, with me today. Hi, Luke. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, Paul. Not too bad.
Awesome. Well, I just want to bring a few things to your attention, Luke. I mean, this is whoever does take over, they have got an almighty challenge on their hands. I'm sure you already know that. You've actually met Bournemouth twice, and you haven't actually beaten them yet in the Premier League. 1-1 draw in January earlier of this year, and in September of last year, a 3-2 home defeat to the Cherries. Your form mirrors Bournemouth in opposite directions, if you will. For example, you've got no wins in 5 games, and you've been outscored 12-3. In those games. Bournemouth, of course, are unbeaten in 5 and have outscored their opponents 12-3. First of all, your thoughts on this Steve Cooper sacking, and then I'm going to get your thoughts on this game going forward. So just if you want to just give me your thoughts on Steve Cooper being relieved of his duties, first of all, please.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's incredibly sad that we've had to lose a manager that brought us up and kept us up last season, but I think he's been let down by 1, senior players within the squad, and 2, players just making amateurish errors, like Matt Turner throwing the ball out to Kulusevski against Spurs. Like, you can't make those sort of errors in the Premier League and expect to get points. And it's been littered throughout the season. You could pick apart every game that we haven't got a win in and go, there's probably an error here or an error here. It's not good play for the vast amount of goals we concede. It's usually hospital balls into the middle of the park or kind of errors where people have slipped and not followed their runners. And I just think part of the fall for him was the fact he didn't have experienced Premier League coaches with him. They were very championship based, and that's probably something he's going to have to look at before he takes his next job. But I do think the writing was on the wall a little bit, where I think you can't go with only 1 win in 13 and expect to keep your job. But I also think there's a lot more factors to it than just the manager getting the sack for things not working. It's just usually the manager's the fall guy and the scapegoat at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's true. Just with it in mind, the only reason I'm going to ask this question is because it seems that all of the major movers and shakers in the media have suggested it. It's obviously not been announced by Nottingham Forest yet, but Nuno Espirito Santo, if he is given the job, are you happy with that? And do you think he can take Forest forward?
It wouldn't be my desired managerial appointment. I mean, he didn't really end very well at Wolves. He didn't have a great spell at Spurs. He got sacked in the Saudi League. Like, he doesn't seem like he's stuck around very long in any of the jobs he's since been at, since he's leaving Wolves. But if you get the Nuno that managed Wolves to the Premier League and into Europe, then yeah, maybe. But I also think he's got a very tough job coming in if he does get the job, because if we slip up, it could turn toxic. If we don't start claiming points, and we've then got rid of Cooper, and it doesn't show much sign of improvement, then I can't see the Forest fans being that tolerable about it, because we tolerated Cooper and the way it was going because of how much he's done for us. Now we're having a fresh with somebody else when really the large majority of the fan base still wanted Cooper to stay. It's not going to look very favourable on the owners if it doesn't then start going right.
Right. So just moving on to the game on Saturday, home game against Bournemouth. Bournemouth are they're definitely in form at the moment, outscoring their opponents 12-3 in the last 5 games. And I mean, that is a 60%, win, 60% terms of goal ratio. But I have to ask you this. Do you feel that you're actually capable of getting? I mean, I feel that as the home team, you'll expect 3 points. But do you feel that Nottingham Forest can get 3 points against this Bournemouth team?
It all depends on the tactics that's used with whoever's in charge of that game and how we set up, and kind of whether we can actually wise up to the fact that in some cases, it doesn't really matter who's on the sidelines. You've got to take ownership of your own performance. If you're slipping in the middle of the park and gifting the ball to somebody that can run at pace, or sliding the ball across and giving it to, say, Philip Billing, for example, who's going to smash it from distance because he loves doing that at the City Ground, then you're going to be in trouble. These professional footballers have got to start taking ownership for their own performances and realizing that whilst, okay, you might not be tactically comfortable with what the manager is asking you to do, you have still got to own the fact that you cannot make these mistakes week in, week out and expect it to just be okay. You're getting paid a lot of money for this, and you've got to evaluate your own performance and think, yeah, I've made a boo-boo here. I need to actually improve and be a bit wiser in this situation, where a ball into midfield where nobody is stood is not a wise decision. Playing the ball maybe backwards, maybe to the side that it's just come from, and then do a movement, that's probably a little bit better. Again, Dominguez against West Ham played a ball sideways across the field when he could really have just dinked the ball over forward to Gibbs White. There has to be a bit more ownership on player performance for me as well.
Well, I definitely agree with you with there, but how will your team cope with the fluent scoring that Bournemouth have right now? In those last 5 games, 2.6 goals for. Your defence, and by your own admission, has been very poor. 1.76 goals against average for the season, 2.6, of course, in the last 5 games. What do you change to kind of deal with Bournemouth's free-flowing football right now? Free scoring football, I should say.
I'm not sure whether there's much we can really change apart from, again, the back line taking a little bit more ownership on how they're performing and following the game plan that's set out for them, not switching off in games, making sure that you're constantly, if you're one of those sort of players has to talk to themselves during the game to keep yourself focused, then do that. Because to me, the sides that we've been picking should really be equipped to deal with the teams we've been playing recently, but we just haven't been able to do that yet. And we're conceding goal after goal and making error after error, and it's not good enough.
All right, well, I'm just going to press you for one more question, Luke. Score prediction?
Oh gosh. With us conceding goals, all I can see is like a 2-1 Bournemouth. I can't even predict a win.
All right. Well, listen, I want to thank you very much for coming on today, Luke. I definitely
No worries.
appreciate that. We'll have a more in-depth discussion on our video later, okay?
Cool. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, Paul.
Thanks.
Thank you
Russ?
very much, Paul and Luke. And Paul, just give us your thoughts on the Forest game against Bournemouth and your take on the sacking. Because for me, I don't think the timing is right for Cooper to go. Because I think if Forest, even if Forest went down, I think he'd be the right man for the job in the Championship. He's proven that to get them back up. But what's your take on it, Paul? Right timing? And I just see they're going against Bournemouth because I think they're going to lose. For me, I'll say 2-0.
Well, just to echo Luke's sentiments, it is very sad that Steve Cooper has been fired. You have to remember that he was loved by the Forest fans. He loved the job he was doing. He worked hard in the job that he was doing. He was loyal to the job that he was doing. There is not a lot of managers that have done that before. He understood the city of Nottingham. He understood the culture and the history of Nottingham Forest. It's very sad that he has to go, and it's going to place a lot of pressure on the new manager to come in and be successful right away, because I don't know how patient those Forest fans are going to be. In terms of the game itself, and in answer to your question, Russ, no, I don't believe the timing was right at all. But excuse me, in terms of the the game itself, again, I can only see this being a Bournemouth victory. I hate to say it, new manager bounce and all, you never know. It's there's always that possibility that that Nottingham Forest will get the victory when the new manager bounce. But I think the way Bournemouth are playing right now, I only see a Bournemouth victory, if I'm being brutally honest. 1-0 Bournemouth, maybe.
Yes, Paul, we'll have to wait and see if that is the case. Next game we're going to touch upon is a game between Crystal Palace and Brighton. It's a derby game, like no other, and one that's always got a lot of meat and feistiness in this one. I caught up with my friend Richard Bond as well. He saw Brighton against Arsenal at the weekend, and this is what I asked him, and this is his response to the question as well. So, first of all, let me just tell you what I said to him. I will just tell you this is the question I posed to my good friend Richard earlier on today. I asked him thoughts on the Brighton performance against Arsenal on Sunday. Was it a good performance? And how well does he think the performance will affect their performance against Crystal Palace on Thursday? Is what Rich had to say to us.
I think if we look at Brighton's performance against Arsenal, they just didn't really turn up at the end of the day. I think Arsenal were the far better team on the day, and Brighton really perhaps were lacking a little bit of energy from after exertion on Thursday night. De Zerbi changed the team around quite a bit, but it just looked a bit disjointed. I don't think they'll have too much to worry about when they go to Paris. It'll be a completely different game, although Paris resurgent really from that comeback point against Manchester City on the weekend will be a tough opposition for them. Problem with Brighton they've had this season really is in these kind of games, they may have gone ahead and they've drawn quite a lot. So I think it's 5 draws they've had in the last 10 games now. So for them, I think the difference between them challenging at the moment for those European placings through a league finish is converting those draws into victories.
Thank you very much there to Richard Bond, and some very interesting points there from Richard regarding the Brighton side of things, and that their Paul, especially with their performance against Arsenal on the weekend. Looking at this one, it's a derby fixture. Form goes out of the window 9 times out of 10. How do you see this game going? Because for me, I'm not going to predict it because I'm going to be the one who providing commentary on this one on the TC Hub. And on Thursday evening, you can listen to us live from around about 7:50 for that one. But how do you see this game going, Paul?
Well, it's been very tight between the clubs in the last 5 meetings. It's been 3 1-1 draws. Most recent meeting was at the Amex on March 15th, which Brighton won 1-0. Last time Palace beat Brighton was at the Amex 2-1 on the 22nd of February in 2021. So that's how tight these games have been. For Palace, both teams not in great form. No win for Palace in 5 games. Brighton have 2 wins in the last 5 games, one against Forest and one against Brentford. But looking at this, Brighton still in a pretty decent position in 9th place. There is definitely a low scoring, really, by Palace with only 1 goal per game on average and a 1.47 goals against average, meaning in 15th place, in terms of points, so they are fairly far clear of the bottom 3, but they could easily be dragged into it if any one of those teams on the bottom 3 goes on a win tear. So it's they're not entirely safe where they are right now at Crystal Palace, and they need to start picking up points. Brighton, on the other hand, 1.94 goals per game. They're doing quite well. Goals against average is pretty high, though, at 1.76, so showing that they have defensive vulnerabilities. And, of course, that's not been helped along by that 6-1 defeat to Aston Villa at Villa Park. But, yes, this will be an interesting one. I think it's going to be very tight. Honestly, I think it's got a draw written all over it, to be honest, Ross.
Paul, I hope somewhere out there it does not make it another 0-0 draw for me. I hope this game I get plenty of goals in.
Oh, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
You would have done 2-0 back-to-back in commentary games I've done for the channel.
No, but the history of the last 5 games doesn't seem to indicate an awful lot of goals. But who knows? We'll see.
Yes, we'll have to wait and see regarding that one then, Paul. Let's bring in the next game, which is Aston Villa against Sheffield United. And Aston Villa flying high in the Premier League table so far, as we saw earlier on. Currently sits in 3rd place. Sheffield United, bottom of the Premier League table. How do you see this game going? 3rd against bottom in the Premier League.
Well, you know, I feel for Sheffield United, but I don't see them getting anything out of this. 12 goals conceded actually probably a little bit more than that. 12 goals conceded in the last 5 games and only 2 scored. They've been outscored 12-2 in the last 5 games. Villa, well, they've had 8 goals in the last 5 games and conceded 4. This, I think, has got a Villa victory written all over it. 2.53 goals against average for the season for Sheffield United, coming up against a free-flowing Aston Villa attack. They're looking amazing at Aston Villa this season. 2.18 goals for, 1.24 goals against average. Sheffield United struggling to put the ball in the net. 0.71 goals for. This is going to be a massive uphill struggle today in that game for Sheffield United. Ollie Watkins 9 goals this season. Leon Bailey 5. Douglas Luiz 5. Yeah, this is going to be it's Villa for the win for me.
Yes, I think Aston Villa's going to win this, and I think they're probably going to win it without conceding as well, Paul. I think Villa have got that good mentality to prove that they can win without the goals being conceded. So for me, I think Villa will win. I'm going to say 2-0. Me, Paul. Would you say that as well, or?
I think it could go as far as 3, but I think 2 is reasonable prediction.
Okay. Next one then is a good game at the London Stadium as West Ham United welcome Manchester United to the stadium. West Ham, in their latest game, played Wolves and beat Wolves by 3 goals. So Manchester United, a 0-0 draw. And United defensively were very, very solid. Going forward, we were very toothless in attack. I could be talking about any game with that, Paul, really. Some games have been very good defensively and toothless in attack. Manchester United this season. So that could describe any match I've played this season. But he describes the game against Liverpool. West Ham, very, very good against Wolves with some very good neat movement, pass and moving, some good shots coming off it as well. How do you see this game going at the London Stadium on Saturday afternoon?
Well, they're both very close together in the league table. Let's just take a look at that. West Ham are in 8th place, Manchester United in 7th. And I'm just going to take a look at that because I actually think, yes. So West Ham can overtake Manchester United with a victory, actually can be knocking on the doors of the European places if other results go their way too. So West Ham have had a very decent season so far, if I'm being honest. Yes, they've had some poor results, that 5-0 defeat away at Fulham, of course, but looking at this, they've got 8 wins, 3 draws and 6 defeats. They're in a very sound position in the league and could be challenging for Europe. Jared Bowen's doing very well. He's got 10 goals, 5 for Mohamed Kudus. Scott McTominay seems to be leading the way for goals for Manchester United. But it's, on the whole, if you look at Manchester United, a 1.06 goals for. That is very low for Manchester United and by their standards. And goals against average of 1.24, whereas West Ham have a 1.71 goals for game. Now, they do have a higher goals against average of 1.76, but it's this one will be very, very tight. But you know what? I can actually see West Ham winning this game.
Yes, I think West Ham will win this game as well. I think West Ham will beat Manchester United. They're good at home, West Ham, and I think the home crowd will. I know they're not really on top of them because of the stadium, but the home support, the loudness that there can be, I think that will help West Ham get over the line against Manchester United. And I think Ten Hag may be under even more pressure if that does happen at the weekend. We're going to take a quick break now and just let people know what we've got coming up on the channel this weekend. You can see it on the screen there with the rest of the fixtures. Thursday evening, 8 o'clock kickoff on air from 7:50. Join me, Paul, James, myself, and for that game as Crystal Palace take on Brighton. We've got that game coming for you. On Saturday evening from around about 5:20, 5:25, we've got Liverpool against Arsenal from on the channel, 5:30 kickoff. And then from around about 12:55 on Sunday afternoon, join Paul James as he brings you coverage of Wolverhampton Wanderers against Chelsea in the Premier League on our very special Christmas Eve show. And we will be recording a Christmas Eve or Christmas style message to put out on Christmas Day for the channels as well, which I'll do one myself. Maybe we try and get Paul to do one, JB potentially, to do a message to all our followers out there, which we'll put out on all our channels at the weekend for you all to listen to. And I'll try and merge them all into one video and then put the video out on all the channels for you. So you've got a message from everybody on the channel, or even just a couple, merge them together and put them out there for you to watch, which would be good for you all to take a listen to. Now we're going to get back to the games, and we've got a few games left now, Paul. We've got Fulham against Burnley to discuss, Luton against Newcastle, Tottenham against Everton, and Wolves against Chelsea to discuss next. And we'll head off to down by the banks of the River Thames, and that is Craven Cottage is the next place we'll go. It's Fulham take on Burnley, and Burnley not playing very, very good football at the moment, home all the way. Fulham very, very good at home in the last couple of matches, scoring 5 goals in each of their last 2 Premier League matches. It was Fulham 5-0 winners against West Ham last time out at home, and they beat Nottingham Forest 5-0 midweek before. They're taking up Burnley side, who have not won a game for quite a while. Last time they won was against Sheffield United a few weeks ago, but since then, back-to-back defeats for the Clouds, including against former boss Sean Dyche's new side Everton in the last weekend by 2-0. Paul, just talk to us about this game, Fulham against Burnley, because for me, I can't see anything other than a win for Fulham and a convincing win in that, with the scoreline being Fulham 5, Burnley 0. I think it's going to be three straight 5-0 wins.
Well, it wouldn't be three. Well, it's not going to be 5-0. I don't think, Russ. I think Fulham are going to win, but looking at their most recent form as well, it's been impressive. They've been free scoring, all right, but they are just coming off the back of a 3-0 defeat at the hands of Newcastle. Burnley 1 in 5, of course, as we know. Sheffield United being that. Being the one there, did manage to draw with Brighton that sandwiched in between the two defeats between Wolves and Everton. Burnley are not good enough. I've said this before. I said this to JB at the end of the game against Everton. They do not have the ability to compete at this level collectively as a team. They're showing themselves to be not good enough to compete at that level. And it's a building process for Burnley at the moment. They talked about it being a long-term project, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a long-term project because at the moment the team is just not ready for Premiership football. They're not. I mean, I'm not saying these players won't eventually be good enough. I do think they will. They're collectively young players, and some of them are excellent. Odegaard, Koleosho, Manuel Benson is a decent player. Lyle Foster, these players are going to be good players. But I don't think they're ready yet. And it's, for me, I think Burnley will lose, and I think it will be 2-0 to Fulham.
You never know. Once Fulham score, you never know, because once opposition teams score against Burnley, Paul, like Everton did, you saw most of their edge drop, and that's why I think it'll be more than, and that's why I think it's probably going to be 5-0 again there, because your team, Burnley's team players, edge drop, and that's why opposition teams are able to get more goals than 1 or 2. They can get 3, some can get 4, and that's why with Fulham's quality, I think could be on through adding 5 potentially.
Well, we'll have to wait and see on that. I mean, obviously they've only conceded 5 goals once this season, and that was against Spurs. So I don't know. I don't think it'll be 5 anyway. I think Fulham will probably win. I don't doubt that. And probably 2-0, maybe even 3-0, but I don't think it will be 5.
Yes, next up then is the game between Luton and Newcastle. Tom Lockyer will be out of this one, obviously, after going off in the abandoned match against Bournemouth at the weekend. We understand, as Paul mentioned during Sunday's game, that game will be replayed in full from the start, because the game wasn't abandoned after the 75th minute. It was abandoned after the 75th minute or onwards. The result of 1-1, which it was at the time, would stand between Bournemouth and Luton. Luton take on Newcastle United, who have found themselves regaining a bit of form. Recently lost a couple of weeks ago, back to winning ways now. And Luton can make things a bit tricky for the opposition. I will go for a Newcastle win by 2-0 in this one, Paul. How do you see this game, and do you think it'll be 2-0, or do you think there'll be more goals in it for Newcastle United?
Well, Newcastle are fairly free scorers at the moment. 2.12 goals for Alexander Isak's bagged 7, Callum Wilson 7, and Anthony Gordon 6. So they've got lots of players that can score goals. The goals against for Luton sits at 2 goals per game. And this is a massive game for them, as they do look the most likely of the 3 in the bottom 3 to get out of there, and there is certainly a lot more fight and commitment from Luton than I'm seeing from Sheffield United or Burnley. But I think that this is going to be a bit too much for them today. Newcastle have got players that can put the ball in the net. They're very, very, very good team. My take on this is it's going to be a Newcastle victory, probably 3-1.
Yeah, so we're both going for Newcastle victories. Their next game up then is Tottenham Hotspur against Everton. Everton coming into this on back of 4 straight wins. Tottenham coming back into this on back of a 2-0 win, which saw them get manager Steve Cooper sacked back at Nottingham Forest, which we've already briefly touched upon earlier on in the programme. But Tottenham against Everton. Everton in really good form at the moment. Tottenham, it's a miss at the moment, especially under Ange Postecoglou in recent weeks. Do you see this being another victory for Everton, or do you think Tottenham will put a stop to Everton's winning run at this moment in time, Paul?
Well, it's always been a difficult game as Spurs for Sean Dyche. The record that he has against them for Burnley wasn't very impressive. Looking at the most recent performances between the two teams, Everton haven't got a win in 5 over Spurs. A couple of draws and 3 draws and 2 Spurs victories. But Everton are really on the back of some good form. They haven't conceded a goal in 4 games. And they've put together 8 goals. That's an average of, well, we all know that's an average of 2 goals per game. But there has not been a single goal conceded in that 4 since the 3-0 loss to Manchester United. As we've spoken before about Everton's defence are amongst the best in the league. This is not going to be an easy game for Spurs. I mean, they've picked up a bit in recently. They've won the last 2 games, 4-1 at Newcastle, 2-0, of course, away at Nottingham Forest. But this is not going to be by any means an easy game. I think this could potentially be a draw. I think this could potentially be a draw, and I think Everton could possibly grind out a 0-0 draw out of this. Who knows? But it's. I think this one's going to be a lot closer than what people might say.
Yes, we'll have to wait and see, Paul, if that is going to be the case. Just one final game to touch upon now, Paul, and I think, well, like I said, I think Everton will probably win this one. Will probably lose their unbeaten run in this one. I think Spurs will win it by a goal to 0 for me between Spurs and Everton. Now to a game which is being played on Christmas Eve for the very first time. Yes, you hear this right. Christmas Eve Premier League football for the first time in quite a while. The last one, Paul, was back in 1995, if I remember correctly. It involved 2 teams, obviously, as every match does, Paul, as we all know. Yes, December 1995 it was at Ellen Road, Leeds United against Manchester United. Leeds United won that game by 3-1. Guy McAllister, Brian Dean and Tony Yeboah with the Leeds side that day, Paul, and see if you remember some of these players' names. Beanie, Kelly, Jobson, Weatherall, Dorigo, Brolin, Palmer, McAllister, Speed, Dean, Yeboah. Wallace came on for Yeboah in that game for Leeds United in game against Manchester United on Christmas Eve back in 1995. And for me, Paul, I was born then, obviously, because I was born in 1992. Just give my age away here on the preview show. But with it being that long of a game, and I'll just let people know, for those interested, the goal scorer for Manchester United on that occasion back in 1995 on Christmas Eve 1995 was Cole. Their lineup were the unusual substitutes for Worthington and Radaby. The Man United lineup, Paul, was Schmeichel, Gary Neville, Parker, Bruce, Irwin, Butt, Keane, Beckham, McClare, Cantona and Cole, with Scholes, Phil Neville and May coming on in that game. Dermot Gallagher was the referee, and in attendance, do you know you like these sort of figures, Paul, was 39,801. So being the first one since 1995-96 season, there's a game on Christmas Eve, is going to be a special occasion, and that's the reason why we're going to be covering this game for us on the TCO for all our listeners, and also on JB Sports TCO 2, and focus on football.
You know, Russ, they played on Christmas Day. League matches were played on Christmas Day until the year 1965. Did you know that?
Yes, I knew that, thanks to my dad and a few other people in my family who's told me all about that as well, Paul. So I didn't know that. But the first Christmas Eve game since 1995-96 season, which I told you Leeds United beat Manchester United by 3-1, which makes me very happy with me being a Leeds United fan to hear that result. And that's why I keep mentioning it, Paul, just so people know why I keep mentioning it. But with that game being the first one since 1995, which is coming towards 20 years in a couple of years' time. So it'll be 18 years since the last Christmas Eve Premier League football match before the one between Wolves and Chelsea. I see this one going, Paul. What sort of occasion do you think the Premier League and the TV people will try and make it would be in the first one on Christmas Eve since 1995 as well, Paul?
Well, I'm sure that this is something that may happen going forward. If they make a success of it, they get a lot of viewers. Well, they're going to want to do it again next year. I'm not so sure about having these games on Christmas Eve. I think you have to give players time with their families. I think the busy Christmas schedule, which kind of really starts on the final weekend before Christmas. Then you've got the Boxing Day fixtures, the 29th and 30th, and New Year's Day. So each teams are playing 3 games over that period, and 9 points up for grabs. For Wolves, they've had a mixed bag of form. Their only victory in the last 5 coming over Burnley, of course. Defeats to both Fulham, Arsenal, and West Ham along the way. They've been relatively close, apart from the West Ham game where they really got a good beating 3-0 there. For Chelsea, well, they're all over the place. They're down in 10th place. Aside from the 2-0 victory over Sheffield United, you really look at the last 4, and it's 3 defeats out of 4. Losses to Everton away 2-0, Manchester United away 2-0, and Newcastle away 4-1. So their away form has been dreadful, and the only victory in those 4 coming at home to Brighton 3-2. This is going to be a very, very close game. I don't think this is going to be so clear. And I think Chelsea are going to find it very, very challenging at Molineux. This is a very, very difficult game, I think, for Chelsea. They've got the players, they've got quality. Nicholas Jackson, 7 goals, 6 goals for Cole Palmer. But then you've got Hwang Hee-chan with 8 goals for Wolves, and Pedro Neto with 7 assists. Mateus Cunha with 3 as well. So you've got quality on both sides here. This one's going to be tight, Russ.
I won't ask you to predict it, Paul, if you don't want to. Because I can't even decide who's going to win this one there.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be very tight. I'd almost say a draw, but I don't know. I've got this feeling that just Wolves might be able to steal this one.
Yeah, I remember when it was announced that this game was going to be played on Christmas Eve. Pochettino told the media that he got a text from his wife when his wife saw that it was being moved to Christmas Eve, and his wife wasn't happy about it.
Oh, that's unfortunate. There's not much that can be done about that. I mean, it's like any wife, doesn't it? If your husband has to work over Christmas and your wife wants your husband to spend time at home with the family, sometimes that happens. It's that's the same really with any industry, unfortunately. I mean, I've worked.
Yes.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I sympathise with it because I do believe that Christmas should be for families, but there's not really much that can be done about that, I'm afraid.
No, absolutely not, Paul. Absolutely not. And like you, Paul, I can't predict which way this game is going to go. So just a quick reminder of what matches we're covering over this next few days for you. On Thursday evening, Crystal Palace against Brighton, with myself, Russ Vernon, in the commentary position for that one. On Saturday, 5:30, Paul James will be in the position of the commentator to guide you Liverpool against Arsenal, and then Paul will be back on Sunday to guide you through Wolves against Chelsea, in our festive Christmas Eve Premier League special. Right then, that's all we've got time for here on the Premier League review and preview show tonight. There is just the table again, just to let you look at the table ahead of the games that we've got coming up over the Christmas period, starting this week. We'll try and get a review show out for this weekend's matches over on Sunday after the Chelsea game has been done against Wolves, so we can cover that game as well. We'll try and get you that done, and that'll be uploaded onto the channel and out to listen to on Christmas Eve in the evening. We'll try and get you some videos done to put out on Christmas Day for you to listen to when you get a bit of free time with your family and friends after you've spent a bit of time with those, to listen to while you're winding down at the end of your Christmas Day evening. But what I will do, I just want to say a big thank you to Paul, big thank you to Luke on behalf of Focus on Football for coming on as well and giving us his thoughts to the proceedings regarding Nottingham Forest and the sacking of Steve Cooper, which for me I was surprised by the sacking of Steve Cooper, and I still don't think the timing is right. You can hear what Paul had to say regarding that. If he thinks the timing is right, and you can hear what Luke had to say as well earlier on in the programme. But from myself, Paul, and the rest of the team here, very thank you for listening, and I will see you all over the Christmas period, potentially on Christmas Eve, with a review show from the matches. But until then, thank you very much for listening. And if we don't speak to you before, have a very Merry Christmas or an Happy Christmas, whichever you're celebrating, which way you celebrate. And we'll see you again real soon. From all the team here, it's a very goodbye to you all. Goodbye, guys.